Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Decolonizing the Narrative. I am today joined by two students from King's College London, and as it is Suicide Prevention Day today, it is currently the 10th of September in 2024, and we're going to be talking about mental health in the Islamic community. And this is mainly a free-flowing discussion, and I'm joined today by Amal and Jumana, and they're going to introduce themselves now pretty much. So Amal, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Yeah, hi, my name's Amal. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
My name's Amal. I am going into my fourth year at King's. I study neuroscience and psychology. And yeah.
My name is Jumana. I'm going into my second year and I'm doing comparative literature, also at King's College London. I'm very excited to be here. I did something similar a while back, so I hope my insight will be insightful.
Inshallah. So even though they didn't say, Jumana is actually a poet as well. So she does poetry as well. So I feel like this kind of goes into that in terms of like a lot of people use poetry as a way of coping.
Yeah,
especially
like an escape.
I know my sister's a poet, for example, and she when she was facing problems, they kind of see it as an escape. So I think we should start with the base of Islam and mental health. Do you think there's some stigma in the Islamic community, both of you, in the Islamic community? Obviously, we all come from different communities. I'm from the South Asian subcontinent side. She's obviously Somali, and you're Arab. You're Arab. So we all come from different communities, but all of which are majority Islamic. So do you feel as if there is a stigma around mental health in the Islamic community?
100%. I think, especially in the Somali community, there is a very big stigma about mental health. I feel like that comes across in two different ways. Either there's like a huge fear of being ashamed about parents or family members feel ashamed that other people in the community will know that their child has some sort of mental illness or mental health condition, and so a lot of the time they don't want to address it and they don't want people to know because of shame or because of how they will be treated afterwards. And I think the second main thing about stigma is the fact or the idea that it's because they're not Islamic enough or they're not religious enough, and that's the reason. And if you focus more on your deen, then you wouldn't be having these sort of issues, which clearly is not.
I want to add
correct.
something onto that you said, and how they're always worried about family members finding out because they're shameful. I don't know how it is in Somali culture, but within the Arab society in the Middle East, there's a lot of significance placed on image.
Be a bit louder for the views.
Okay, sorry. There's a lot of significance and importance placed on your image and the image that you give off to the society, and your reputation. Basically, a lot of the things that they do kind of circulate around keeping this image maintained. So when it starts to spread that someone's struggling a little bit with some anxiety or some trauma or depression, it devalues that image, and that's why they start to feel shame. It's almost like, oh no,
it's a reflection of their parenting.
Yeah, it's like, have I failed at my job? Basically, that's kind of what it comes down to. So it's really interesting to bring up the feelings of shame when you speak about mental health and mental illnesses.
And I'll say, even myself, I would say that there is a stigma, even from myself, to be honest, about the mental health sort of image. I'll say this openly. Is that, especially when I was younger, I kind of thought, what is the point of a lot of these, the therapy and the medication and different types of things? It is some extent to the way I grew up in South Asian household and Islamic, But to be honest, even still, there is some form of stigma, even within me, I'll be honest.
100%.
About, if some people get therapy, what is the point of therapy? You have people to talk to, and the to be honest, medication as well. And I would pose to you guys, do you think that therapy is the best form of sort of relief for people struggling with? Because there's we can't just say mental health. Mental health is a very broad term. There's various different things. Some are actual medical disorders as well, right? But for someone, okay, let's go for the most common ones like depression, anxiety. Do you feel like therapy is the best, kind of cover for that?
I
think we have different opinions about
I think we might have different opinions, which is really interesting. I used to have the opinion where I thought that, okay, therapy, like when I was personally going through a really rough, low time in my life, I thought therapy would solve all my problems. I was like, I need therapy. I need to speak to a therapist. I need a professional, someone who can explain to me, someone who she has all the answers, right? I had therapy. That was not how it went at all. And I realized therapy is not the solution. It's not the answer. It's not the antidote. It's the guidance. It's the guidance. And over the years, I've come to realize that when we're talking specifically in terms of like depression, anxiety, maybe not on a very severe level where you might need to be medicated, but on a level where it might be, you know, circumstantial or like environmental, I've come to realize that, you know, of course, alongside therapy, releasing those emotions and understanding how to manage those emotions, but what it is mainly, it's how can you take control of the aspect in your life that you have control over. So that was one of my hardest lessons to learn. I can't control how other people react. I can't change other people's characters. There are things that are out of my control, but what is in my control? Fitness, exercise, a good sleeping routine, being productive throughout the day, your diet, my hobbies, making sure that I entertained myself in the way that I like, socializing with people. Even if I didn't really feel like it, I would kind of force myself to leave my house, see that friend, talk to that person, send that message, because community is something that you realize once you start to be pulled out of, you start to spiral downwards. So I think, I believe, you know, therapy will be helpful, it's beneficial, but it's guidance. And once you actually look into what therapy teaches you, it teaches you how to live this high quality lifestyle, how they stress on, you know, make sure you get fitness in, you get your exercise in, make sure you're eating the right food, make sure you're getting enough sleep. When it comes down to it, these are all these core things that actually help reduce all of these feelings and emotions.
100%.
What do you think?
I think in terms of therapy, there's so many different types of mental health professionals. It's not the be all end all where it's just one form of therapy. And I think one thing that people don't really realize is that one of the most important things about whether there'll be any form of outcome, positive or not, at the end of a therapy, is based on the relationship between the therapist and
100%
the person. So there's so many therapists out there, all specializing in different forms of therapy and things, and like, you know, how likely is it that the first therapist you'll try is the person who's best suited for your needs? Like, it's very unlikely, and you need to understand or know and try different therapists and different forms of therapy before you understand or before you can see the benefits of it. And again, it's something that you work towards. It's not 1, 2, 3 sessions and you're done. It's a continuous journey. It's a continuous thing to work on. But I think one of the most important things when we're talking about therapy, especially as Muslims, is the lack of Muslim mental health professionals, and I think that is one of the biggest issues. I think there's a whole lack of understanding it, and another part of the stigma and the lack of understanding and like how people don't feel comfortable about therapists is because if you're going to a white non-Muslim man talking about your issues, how likely is he to understand the context, the differences, the nuances that come about from being in the community that you're in and the culture that you're in? Religion and culture are such core parts of your identity that you can't undergo therapy. Exactly, you can't exclude that in that therapeutic process, and you have to have that included in it. And if the professional does not understand this, then they're not the best person to help you go through this. And
especially if you're at a point in your life where you're actually struggling internally with your own deen, because I was at
mental
that
health
point
and
as well.
deen, iman, very good together.
This is what I would ask you all, is that do you feel as though Islam helps to a large extent with any difficulties that you face?
100%. I think if we're talking about mental health and the extreme end, well, not really extreme end, but because it is more common than you think, suicidal ideation and suicidal thoughts are a lot more common than people would expect. 1 in 5 people will have suicidal thoughts at one point in their life, I think around the world globally is 720,000 deaths by suicide each year, and I think at least this year 2024, 72% of that was from middle or low income countries. And I think that in the communities that we have, like so especially since today is Suicide Prevention Day, I think that people don't realize that there really is such a big, there's such a big amount of people who are affected by suicidal ideation.
That's a very interesting point that you raised, is that you say 72% is from low-income households or low-income countries?
Countries.
Because I think there is a sort of idea that suicide only happens in countries like the US and UK and this or whatever. Because, in my opinion, from my understanding, is that when I went to a place like Bangladesh, so I was there obviously during the revolution and that, and you go through a very, very, very difficult time, is that when people are in that sort of state where they don't have time to think about killing themselves, they don't have time to think about that, because the economy is so bad and they have to try and work and provide for their this and that, whatever. There's a sort of idea that then they don't struggle with any form of mental health, they don't. So I think it's only in a place like the UK and US where they have everything that then they start thinking about all this stuff in their head, and then all the issues arise. But the fact that you mentioned the fact that 72% of suicides actually come from lower income areas, countries, that shows that 100%, it's not the case.
And very similarly, from my own experiences within the Somali community as well, I've realised that obviously with the Somali civil war and everything, and there was a huge refugee crisis and people fled a civil war, and the effect of that on people's mental health, especially the elder generation who was involved in this, like our parents and things, is so understated. And I think that because they were in this sort of panicky fight or flight sort of environment for so long, they're so used to burying and like moving forward with any issues and things, so they don't feel like it's something that needs to be addressed or spoken about. And then when we talk about generational trauma and things like that, you start off with people who do not work on, or people who don't realize the effect that their life has had on them, and then they have children and either pass on that trauma, or their children go through other sorts of trauma, and they don't, because they're so used to not dealing with their own, they think that that's the gold standard of how to act in sort of things. So when we talk about Islam and stuff, I think Islam is so important when it comes to these type of things. First of all, the Quran. Like the Quran is something that subhanAllah, so, it's the word of Allah, so it's something that you always reflect on and go back on in times of hardship and in times of difficulty, either listening to Quran, reading Quran, that kind of thing. But also we need to talk about like how people's iman is affected so much during times like this, during not even just things like depression and anxiety and stuff, because a lot of these conditions that are like very common are usually also forms of comorbidities with other conditions. People with developmental conditions like ADHD and autism, and then neurological conditions like seizures,
it's clearly psychology
and NeuroScience,
and things like that. Like there's often comorbidities that come with this. So I feel like that really needs to be understood about the impact that has on your deen and your iman.
Jumana, do you have anything to add?
It's really interesting. I think I wanted to add something when you said that we always look back to the Quran and we reflect on the Quran. I always find myself, whenever I'm going through something, it could be something so like minor, not even that deep, but when I want to seek like comfort and refuge from my emotions, the one thing that I can't stop thinking about, Surah Al-Duha. It plays in my head and I feel the need to just grab my Quran and read it. I just want to read it, and I'll read it over and over again, and then I'll listen to a sheikh read it and recite it, and it's just so etched into my heart. And I reflect on it, and I reflect on the context behind it and the history behind it, how it was brought down to us and the time that it was brought down. And I think, ma wadda'aka rabbuka wa ma qala. So it's like, Allah did not forsake the Prophet, who's the greatest man alive. He's not going to forsake me either. And it just brings me so much.
And even if you look
comfort.
at the historical context of what Duha, why it was Surah Duha, it's what Amal Ali. The reason it was revealed is because Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu, I think it was 6 months, he didn't receive a revelation, and he starts doubting in himself whether, because he's now got all these people who are now following the deen of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, and because before that he would get revelation or surahs in dreams, and he would see it often. For 6 months he didn't see any of it. I think it was 6 months, maybe it might have been more, might be less, but the scholars differ, but it's around 6 months. And he didn't receive a revelation. He starts doubting in himself, am I actually Rasulullah? Am I actually the Prophet of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala? What was I just, have I become a lunatic? Have I just,
None of us really face that kind of pressure of having to lead an entire community.
And the thing is as well, is that, subhanAllah, when you look at the struggle of Rasulullah, and I was listening to a podcast by Yasir Qadi, and it was called the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. Every single struggle possible that can be inflicted upon a man was inflicted upon the Prophet Muhammad virtually. He was an orphan from birth. His father died. He lost his mom when he was the age of 6. He was raised by his uncle and granddad's family, Abdul Muttalib. Yes, he was respected, but he was in a position where he wasn't earning much money. He was married to Khadija radiallahu anha, and every child in his life died during his lifetime, except Fatima radiallahu anha. And he lost every single one of his daughters and sons. No son that he had made it to adulthood. His daughters were able to get married fine, but no son he had was able to make it to adulthood. When his son Ibrahim radiallahu anhu died, the Abu Jahl, I think, was celebrating and screaming and running. Imagine the day of your son's death, like the day that your baby son had died, your worst enemy is running around celebrating the death. Look, this man had died. Praise be to. And after all that struggle, he then has the revelation by Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, and he couldn't even believe the revelation he was having, right? By Angel Jibreel, that he ran home and he was shaking, Zammiluni to Khadija radiallahu anha, because he couldn't believe it. He then just goes against all his forefathers. He goes against everything everyone has done, and he brings forth the religion of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. What a huge burden. He has a small group of following who are boycotted, harmed, oppressed, and the Sahaba at the time were boycotted to the point where they would eat the leaves. You see that tree there? They would eat the leaves of a tree to their droppings look like the droppings of animals. All of this oppression. One of the first Sahaba, Sumayya radiallahu anha, who was pregnant, was killed, and they rammed the spear until it killed the baby and it killed her. All this different struggles.
Trigger warning.
Trigger warning. Sorry. He then had to leave his home of his entire life to the age of I think he was 53 years old. He moved then to Medina, a new land. So many of the Sahaba became ill. Was in comparison to Mecca, Medina is an oasis. He then moves to this land. Again, he has to now bring these people together. Then he goes and conquers Mecca. Finally, he conquers Mecca, and before the Ummah really then expand, because then after his death, the Ummah expanded into Syria, Egypt, all these areas. He passes away before the Ummah was able to even gain huge amounts of land.
It's amazing to reflect on how, through actual instances throughout history, we've seen how faith has kept someone going, and we have this amazing story of our Prophet who is now loved by an entire ummah, which is greater than he could have ever imagined, I think, at that time. And despite hearing all of the trials and tribulations he's faced, how he kept faith in Allah and how it served him for the better.
And all of the other prophets as well, who have each of their own trials and tribulations, each call to Allah, and through their faith face their hardships with the help of Allah. And I think we should also think about how people think a lot of the time that obviously mental health is affected by psychological, environmental factors, biological, cultural, social, all these other factors, but people a lot of the time, the question is, especially in communities and Muslim communities and stuff, they ask why. Why are you depressed? Why do you have this anxiety? What's the reason? They always look for one singular reason. A lot of the time you don't have these trials and tribulation that the prophets and other people go through. A lot of the time sometimes there's nothing you can pinpoint in your life that's causing these feelings, but at the end of the day you do still have the depression, you still have the anxiety. So I think it's less of asking, and it's not just that, but also people talk about all the trials and tribulations that other people face, and that a lot of the time it's stigmatized that you shouldn't speak about these things because it's a test from Allah, and if you complain, you're failing that test. You know, this is the test that Allah's given you. But at the end of the day, you know, it's a test, but you still need,
doesn't mean you have to withstand it
silently.
Yeah. Of Iman. It's not.
Exactly.
It's not about like, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, they say that He does not burden a soul more than it can bear.
Exactly.
I think the moment you fail the test is, do you know that we were talking about suicide rates? That's the moment in which you failed proverbial test.
Yeah, but it's really important to look out for what causes a person to reach that stage. Because I remember reading this amazing, beautiful extract, and it was about how people don't
comparative
actually.
literature student here, guys.
We're each having our own.
It was talking about how people don't actually want to die. People just want to be. People just want to live live differently. They just want to live a different life. But the only way that they can see as an escape, as a way out, is through death, right? But that it's not because they actually want to suffer and die. They just feel so helpless about their situation that they just want to live different. They want to live a different life than the one that they currently live. And that's the only way that they see out.
But do you think that is, to an extent, a sign of a weak iman?
No.
To take that step.
I think you should be very careful with how you say that, because
those feelings, but to do it.
I think it's very careful. You should be very. I think, yeah, but you should be very careful to say that, because I think unless you've actually experienced these kind of feelings, you can't really gauge how intense they can be and how damaging they can be. And it's not to say that you have a weak iman, but it's like, okay, maybe I have.
They don't have the support
they don't have. To talk about support systems, don't get me started on that.
We'll get into that
support
in a bit,
systems,
and if
to
you
have a
think about
supportive family and supportive friends and an actual system around you that is so embedded within community, somewhere along the way, we have lost that.
100%.
To be supportive.
Because of the shame and because of the stigma, you don't
like
have that. And
how you're saying they kind of like, interrogate you. Why are you feeling this way? Forget
What's
about the why.
it?
Just help me move on from here.
It
Just
doesn't
give me the
matter
support
why,
that I need.
100%. And if you think about it, it's like the age for, especially for suicide ideation, the suicide or the death for suicide, it's usually the age 15 to 29-year-olds that face this the most, and they're usually, I think it's the third lead cause of death in 15 to 29-year-olds. Yeah, and I think when you were talking about earlier about obviously preventing these things and talking about it, only around I think it was 40%. Only 40% of people feel comfortable talking about any form of suicidal thoughts or suicidal ideation. I think it's not a cause of weak iman. I think it's the cause of not having these support systems and not having this either through I believe in a holistic sort of approach where it's medication when needed, therapy, community, a healthy lifestyle. I feel like it's all of these together that will help, but community is severely lacking. I
want to talk about that weak iman point a bit, and I'm gonna bring in the hadith that everyone brings about tying your camel, right? So I think in Islam we're taught you cannot just sit and pray for the things you want and expect them to fall out of the sky. You can't just sit and say, I have a strong iman, why do I still feel depressed? Are you eating well? Are you sleeping well? Are you 100%. Going out? Are you studying? Are you learning? Are you educating yourself? But also the fact that I want to tie it back to how you said 15 to 29. I feel like that's a very experimental phase in everybody's life.
100%.
And I want to draw this back to a sister who we know who recently reverted, and how she'd come to us and she would listen to our stories, us as people born Muslim, and she would tell me, everyone has a revert story, whether you were born Muslim 100%. Or not. We all have our revert stories, and I feel like we go through this experimental phase. We go through this phase where we're questioning.
Born Muslim, but you need to find Islam yourself.
Iman comes in waves. It comes up and it comes down. You have low tides and high tides.
Exactly. But can we be honest as well that everyone finding themselves, that comes with I think that's just with life in general, not just with Islam.
of course.
It's like, for example, you figure out what you like and what you don't like when you're as you grow up. You know, you might like football and you might not like basketball. Just as a quick example, you might not like basketball.
Of course, Mehdi.
And you might find that you like football. Yeah, you might find that you like football. And if so, for example, it's like with same with Islam. It's like you find yourself getting closer and closer. I know people who literally now, as they're getting 19, because I'm only 17, you guys are a bit older, but as someone who, they're hitting the age of 19, and only now they're starting to understand Islam. And only now they're starting to find themselves.
Everyone
in
has a reason.
And someone who's 10 years old, they're praying 5 times a day. But still, it's like, for example, I think it's very important. A lot of noise outside. Hopefully the mic doesn't pick that up. For someone who was born into Islam, or all of us were born into Islam, it's easy for us to adopt stuff like the practices. You know?
It's easier.
It's easier.
Doesn't make it.
I think everyone again
for
has their
example,
hardships.
we go into, for example, we go into like Arabic school when we're young. Or, I mean, you're Arabic, so you just went to school.
You just went to school.
I
went to Dixie. I don't know.
Yeah, I went to Arabic school when I was younger. You go to Arabic school, madrasa, and you learn Arabic, you learn the Quran, you learn this, you learn that. But to be honest, I think personally that people don't have a full, in-depth understanding. You kind of just learning, memorizing.
There comes a point you reach. You reach a point somewhere in your life where you stop and you realize I need to.
Seeking knowledge is so important.
I need to step out of this bubble and I need to find something that's worth knowing that is outside of what is being directly taught to me.
I think that is important. It is important that you, when you're from a young age, for people who, because there's two ways. One person who is reverted, so they never had any Islamic upbringing, maybe had some Muslim friends, and then they found their way to Islam. And there's people who are born Muslim, and to be honest, I think that the fundamentals being taught to you from a young age is still crucial in your kind of founding or finding Islam. Do you not agree?
Yeah, 100%.
I think that causes one to familiarize themselves with these ways, so it becomes really normalized.
It's become easy to practice.
It becomes normalized, but I think it really differs from person to person, because someone who might have been raised in this way, but again, it all depends on like your upbringing, but you still might struggle a lot more than a revert will,
100%.
because you haven't had your reversion story, because you didn't find this yourself. There has to come a point where you actually seek this out, and you genuinely understand the core concept of why, you know, Islam is Islam, and why these principles and these rules have been laid out for your greater good. I always think back to how people say that Islam isn't actually a religion, because they don't want to term it as a religion, but more it's like a lifestyle that has been presented to us by Allah in a way that we can live a good, just, high quality life.
I said this a million times. I said it when we were in camp, and I say it all the time. That it was Imam Maududi, who was a Pakistani scholar, who said that Islam is not the name of any religion. It's the name of a revolutionary party that has come to change society, to change politics, to change your lifestyle, to change the world. And anyone who wants to be a part of this party can be a part of this party and join this revolutionary movement. So as opposed to simply just
human revolutions.
I disagree. I think we should be careful to politicize Islam too much, because it isn't an intensely political religion.
I think there's politics.
I think it's political, and there is politics, but we shouldn't politicize it as a movement.
I think, but when you make it, I feel like Islam is so much greater than simply, because when you hear religion, when you think of Christianity, you think this is the name of a religion. So it's now what happens with Christianity is everyone's like, oh, it's my individual, it's my individual faith. It's not like, what I'm trying to say. So there's no one faith. There's no one. But with Islam, there is one. We all should be one.
100%. Let's tie back to.
Let's tie back to mental health.
Thing. If we're talking about low iman and stuff, I think we need to also talk about the guilt and difficulty that comes with struggling with your deen when you are when you have a mental health condition. Obviously, for people who have conditions and who have things where they can't pray, obviously Allah has not written that for them to for it to be wajib for them, so that's fine. But with people who are struggling with, say, depression or anxiety or personality disorders or any of these sort of things, where praying is difficult for them, fasting is difficult for them, a lot of these things are difficult for them, and we can say that we get our relief and stuff from Quran and this and that, but prayer, but once you're in these sort of states, it's very difficult to do this. I mean, when you're depressed, you can't even get out of bed. Like, your body's heavy, you struggle to brush your teeth, to wash your hair, to do anything that is to do anything that's just day to day, to eat, to do these things. So salah is of course going to be extremely difficult.
And what you were saying there is like even how you struggle to eat. I think it's very important that you like show how mental health can lead to issues in your physical health as well, right?
It's all linked.
But that's why I think Islam ties in with virtually all of this, in my opinion. For example, in Islam, you have it talks about the importance of being, you know, fit physically, not only just for man, for a woman as well. They talk about being physically fit.
Add to that as well. There's a huge misconception in the Muslim community that Islam is anti-mental health, anti-medication.
There's so much
but
about Islam.
The beauty of Islam is you know, I'm so thankful for my upbringing. Alhamdulillah, my dad has always drilled certain things into me, and I'm so thankful for them. He has always taught me to prioritize my health above all. That is my physical health, my emotional health, and my mental health. Because once one of these things starts to deteriorate, you will never be able to live a good life, and you will never be a better Muslim.
One will affect the other as well.
The core foundation base, like, here is reaching a good Muslim. The core foundation, the base here is your physical, mental, and emotional health. And once one of these bases start to fall and to break, then it affects the rest of your things. So that's why we have to prioritize what holds us up and what keeps us up. I was talking to my dad the other day, and I told him, Dad, I think, like, this is Arab dad, by the way, Arab Muslim conservative father, and I was like, I'm struggling a little bit, and I'm thinking of reaching out to my university, and I was like, I think I'm struggling with a bit of anxiety. His response shocked me. He was like, Jumana, I think that's a great idea. I fully support you. I was like, whoa, who are you? But you know what? His response I really liked. He was like, I fully support you. Reach out to a doctor. Find this out. But let me share some du'as with you. But try and read Quran every day, at least, even if it's a page. He was like, you don't have to read a lot, just the fact that you get into that habit of reading something every day. He was like, just try and do that. And when you make salah, make sure you make as much dua as possible. He was like, trust me, your deen is so important, but Jumana, I fully support your decisions to go and find help. And that is, I think, how
breaking stigma.
Wallahi, bro, my dad breaking stigma. I was so, do you know what? That in and of itself healed something inside of me. I was feeling anxious, I was feeling down, but seeing my dad, that's it. All comes back to support systems. Support systems are so vital.
It's even everything that we're saying, it always goes back to Islam, like the idea of a support system. What does Islam encourage most? Family, being with your family, being with your community,
family, your neighbors.
The importance of loving your mother and respecting your father.
I was about to say love thy neighbor.
Love thy neighbor is Christianity.
I was going to say,
but it's still an Islamic, Islamically.
All of these things, like for example, the support system, being close with your family and friends, and having that. Islam encourages all of this. So I think this whole idea, because the reason that we're making this is like, there is a stigma, it's undeniable, of mental health in the Islamic community, and not just even in the Islamic community. I think in cultural communities, in developing societies, ethnic communities. I feel like even in the white community,
people of colour,
people of colour, but even in the white community, people who like spicy food, you know. But I feel like even in the Christian community, there probably is the white community, there is probably a stigma around it as well, maybe to a lesser extent, but it's certainly in the Islamic community that stigma is like, do you know, going on to a different topic, like we weren't talking about, but I made a video about Arab supremacy, and it's like how people believe there's a stigma about even talking about Arab supremacy because it's believed to be, if you criticize the Arabs, you're being anti-Islamic. And it's like, if you talk about mental health, you're somehow also being anti-Islamic. And it's like all these stuff that you think, they're being anti-Islamic. The second that you actually just go out and read.
Hardship and difficulty is such a cool concept in Islam. I don't understand why
it's been shown to us in every Islamic story.
Forget every Islamic
sadness
story.
Even
if you look at history, if we look at any portion of history, you think that people are just like, the idea that mental health just came about like last week.
Yeah, like my man got depressed one day out of nowhere. And it just popped up.
Depression. Like these people didn't have these various different.
There just wasn't names for it.
The problem is there wasn't maybe, like for example, there wasn't maybe the awareness. Maybe there wasn't the awareness. Go on. Do you want to explain like the Arabic?
No.
Anyway, talking
No.
about support systems and stuff, back to what Jumana was talking about, I think that support systems, subhanAllah, are so important. And another thing about seeking out and reaching help, I went through something similar where I, during I think lockdown, the first lockdown, I started noticing like symptoms of depression. Also, people don't really realize like symptoms of like mental health because they're so taboo and like stigmatized that people are not really aware of it.
But I also think it's something that's become normalized because of how common it's become
now it's
in
become
today's
more common.
society.
People have more awareness.
Doesn't mean it's normal, but it's just more common. So we
Mm.
kind of overlook a lot of things. We're like, oh wait, this isn't actually something normal. Like I should be having 3 meals a day. Why am I not eating?
Yeah, but for terms of community and support systems, it was actually my sister who first noticed that I was depressed. I didn't even realize it. I was just like chilling in bed thinking, yay, no school, nothing, no exams, I'm out here chilling. And then, rotting away in bed. And then she realized, she was like, okay, something's really off with Amal. And then it was that support that pushed me to go speak to my GP, and we all know the NHS healthcare system. It took me 50 billion years, but at the end of the day, I obviously was diagnosed with depression and anxiety, and I think that once that sort of is understood, that I think there's something healing about understanding. Once you have understanding of your condition, and once you have an understanding of what you're going through, you can actually like do something about it. And I think having that community and having my sister, shout out to my sister, and big up sister, and my parents, and then I went to a GP, and then I got put on antidepressants, or I was offered antidepressants, and then that comes into the whole thing about medicine and how taboo medicine is in Somali communities.
Can't lie, I'm anti-medicine.
So for me, medicine is, I feel like in the NHS they push out too much medication.
It's too
much.
Too
For people that don't even
solution
need
for
it.
that
People who
much.
don't need it,
Yeah.
I think like.
And I think the
I
issue
think
of
it
that
comes
is
down to the whole like
the waiting list of the
waiting
NHS.
list, yeah.
No, but also the businesses behind like pharmaceuticals and companies and stuff. They want to push a product.
And this comes
Ultimately,
up.
they're selling.
Capitalism.
They're selling something.
Capitalism.
And the thing is, medication. I feel it.
I think
only
the UK
silences.
is overly medicated.
Yeah, I think medication ultimately its purpose is to kind of silence symptoms rather than
Exactly.
Deal with
You're
them. It's like nowadays,
you're treating
for
the
example,
symptoms. You're not treating the actual issue in itself.
For example,
and it's just a way
Which
to
is-
like shut you up. Take these, you won't suffer that much.
with like that and therapy, like obviously I think
it's
there's
always a
huge benefits of
combination.
therapy,
I
but
think.
now people like as soon as like there's something wrong or push out therapy. Why? Because they get paid £50 an hour, and then suddenly
to talk
them,
about
I
it.
think
they're
it's not
making
just
money. And then the depressant like the medicine companies, they're making money. So it's now everything is. They're not even just making.
Everything's been monetized,
They're making
basically.
money over literally everything. Like when you go anywhere, even if you go in Umrah and this that whatever, there's ways of trying to make money. There's people running businesses on packages and stuff like that.
But let's make it clear first of all that
Everything.
a lot of people do need medication.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
A lot of mental illnesses and conditions, schizophrenia is so important.
Yeah.
Even things like depression, anxiety,
ADHD.
like it's very important
It
to
is
take a medication. But at the end of the day,
it can't be given to anyone and everyone.
It shouldn't
not
be
just
the easiest solution.
But I think again, I keep saying this, but I think it's a combination. The medication, the therapy, the lifestyle, the support system, all of this is important. But back to what I was saying about being offered the thing with the antidepressants, it caused like for me quite a big issue in terms of like taking medication and how that would be, and like the effects of medication and things like that. But not just that, how it would look kind of if I took medication, if I now took antidepressants, it'd be like, like a stigmatized kind of thing. And not just for me, but for, I know a lot of people in the Somali community who are on antidepressants or any other medication, and it's like so secret. Like it's so secret. Like I didn't even know until they found out I was on it. They're like, oh, by the way, I'm on it too. And I'm like, whoa, I knew you my whole life and you never told me. I was like, I don't understand why this needs to be like hidden. I'd be popping my pills in front of anyone. Like if I need to take it, I have to take it. Like I don't understand why it's thing. And I think again, understanding is so important. I think this lack of understanding, the lack of understanding is the main thing that I think and the shame, but also the lack of understanding of what these mental illnesses are, why people have how they can actually be treated and how they can be thinking. I think once like people realize that, like once my parents realized why I was having these symptoms and what I had, and the fact that these medications along with X, Y and Z would help me, then khalas, it's
that goes back to what we were saying as well before. It's like the support system, but also how you said medications plus X, Y and Z. Because nowadays, let's be honest,
people just take
medication is still living their
people overdose
life.
Like people overdose.
I mean, I thought the medication would just like when I took it, I was like, yeah, I'm taking it, maybe Gucci. No, you have to take it.
That's how I feel about therapy as well.
You know what you're saying about tying? You know what you said about tying your camel, right?
It's expensive, too expensive. Therapy.
What you said about tying your camel, it's like people, for example, they pray and they think everything's going to be cushy. But it's like people pop medication and they think, oh, everything's going to be good. Nothing. I think anything without action will not have a positive effect.
100%.
Because for example, you just simply praying and not knowing what you're saying, or not knowing a deeper connection, or you reading Quran without zero khushu, or trying to actually understand what you're reading, or trying to actually focus in on what you're reading. You doing dhikr but just after like quickly like this, like you do everything what you do. It's not even just about doing actions, without doing everything with intention as well. Because we always talk about how intention is such a huge part of Islam.
100%.
I'm not praying just to pray and say, okay, look, tick box, okay, I pray. Tick. You should pray because you genuinely want to turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, there is going to be days where you need to pray because, as in like, it's a thing now.
Your iman won't always be at that point.
And I think that's okay.
Sometimes you do have to
Sometimes
force
you have to
because the discipline comes with the routine.
Discipline comes with the routine,
But discipline with mental health conditions is very difficult. I think with with things like that, support systems, it's not just support systems needed to understand it, it's not just support systems needed to help you take these steps to seek help and things like that, but you need support systems for you to fall back on once you are at a point where it is a serious issue. My iman's been affected so much by my conditions and things, and I feel like if you don't have the support system to say, hey, I'm really struggling with this and this and this, I haven't been able to do this and this and this, and without the judgment, without the shame, without the astaghfirullah, how could you do that, you are a kafir, all of these, literally all of these stuff.
You have the version? Kafir.
Also stuff like I feel like in the Islamic community, at least in London or in the UK, it's become like very much like judgmental, and it feels like when we're back home, when he did this and he knows this, and those random aunties,
they have depression,
those aunties on the WhatsApp group chats, and they just say, suddenly everyone knows your business.
Oh, did you hear? This girl has that.
And it's like
girl
all of this stuff.
She's seeking
then the whole village knows.
The whole village, forget the village, suddenly the whole UK.
My auntie from Somalia calls me, Amal, I hear you.
And it's like those.
I hear you're taking medication.
Astaghfirullah, not good.
Those things.
You girl, get up and pray.
Those things aren't beneficial to anyone because it's just gonna make you. And that's why I think a lot of people in the Muslim community do experience like stuff like depression, anxiety, because they don't have anyone to talk to. But then I would say as well, I would caveat that with saying, to be honest, I don't know about you guys, but anytime I've gone through a difficult time, as much as talking about it with different people does benefit, I think turning to Allah back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the person, not a person, but as a person, something that you can turn to, and there isn't, because I feel like also when you're talking to when you're talking to different people, there is an element of ego, and there is an element of you kind of try to hold back. I
think that's a male thing.
That's a male thing.
I've been letting everything.
That's mainly a male thing.
I've been speaking from
I'm like, Amal, oh my god,
Jumana,
let me tell you.
It happened to me the other day.
But when you turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's what ego can you have?
What ego? I see your point,
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows everything.
I was creative.
It's the creator of everything.
In front of your creator,
you think you're going to have, what
are you holding back? He knows everything.
Forget that, you don't even need to say.
He knows yourself more than you know yourself.
Because I know for men at least, it's very different than for women who's experiencing something
Another
like
thing we should talk about is
stigma around male mental health.
Just forget the Islamic community, but general, I feel like male's mental health, it isn't talked about, and I can understand why it's not talked about. I can understand because there is an element of ego and strong man and this, that, whatever. But to be honest, I think that there is a point behind that. Like I can understand it as a guy.
I had a really interesting conversation with a guy that I know about this, and he was talking to me about how he would never let himself cry in front of his kids or his parents.
I've heard that multiple times.
I sat down and I said, okay, I understand, because you know, as as women, sometimes we have to warp our perspectives to see it how men see it.
Yeah, you guys.
So I understand that. Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
to a level we
you
won't,
especially, yeah, but like.
Generally,
Especially in an Islamic way, like, okay, the man has a role to play. He has to be seen as this kind of person in the household. But my personal opinion is, I think that a man should be able to be his true self with his wife. I understand holding back from your kids. I understand not letting your kids see a quote-unquote weaker side, although I don't necessarily think it's the weaker side.
When a guy cries
Can I tell you what I
in
agree
front of
with
his
you?
kids, it depends. I think young kids, I
I don't
think,
agree
be
with the
careful.
kid's point. I agree with the kids. You shouldn't cry in front of your
I
kids.
don't
Your
think-
young
But in
impressionable
terms of your
kids,
wife,
probably not.
the reason I agree with you.
But
is
maybe
because-
when your kids are older and you can
because
relate to
your
them on a
kids-
more
your
emotional
kids seeing, no, not as in like crying
no,
in front
no,
of them,
see?
but I'm saying your children seeing that their father is capable of these emotions and displaying that. I think that is healthy for them to see that that is something that they can do in the future.
Also,
and if
I think it's a very grey area.
I've never seen my parents cry, then I would think that crying is like something that you just
But no,
don't
see,
do.
you can see your parents cry, but I also think it's the way in which you go about it, and it's like you still have to maintain a certain image of your parents
Obviously,
if
I'm
you
not
want to
saying
earn
go
their
to your child
respect.
and start crying
But
in front of them, but
I
I'm
think the
also-
reason I would agree with the wife point in terms of being vulnerable is because
You can share your emotions
Yeah,
with
I
your
always
kids.
say,
the
you
Prophet
cry.
*Sallam was.
Yeah.
You can share your emotions
Yeah,
with your
exactly.
kids.
Emotional,
You
the
can
Prophet said being
validate.
emotional,
You can
like-
validate your kids' emotions, not invalidating them, but you can also. I think
Maintain a
also
balance.
the men have to maintain their ego to a certain extent, or else they will break.
Yes, because the thing is a
But I
bit
think-
fragile.
No, but okay, listen. Relax, yeah. But I think there is a element of pride, and that I think also
But emotional maturity is
emotional
important.
maturity is very important. But pride is
And
very
the sensitivity
important.
and awareness is
Pride
such
is very important.
But you can teach your kids about these kind of things
Yeah, you can
without
teach your kids,
necessarily having to
but
put
there's-
yourself
I'm
in
not
that
saying
situation.
the children. I'm talking about men
But
themselves.
for men, I
Yes.
think pride is a very important thing that they have to preserve. Not ego, and not arrogance.
What are you proud of?
But
like
No, it's not about
crying.
what you're proud. It's not about what you're proud of. It's about, for example, something bad happens, and you need to maintain a level of coolness and sort of maturity, I would say, around that situation.
You just need to find a solution.
And you have
a
to try and
logical
look for
solution
a logical
be
solution.
reasonable, not
And-
act on emotion. You know.
It's very unhealthy to
keep it in,
all these
I
emotions
agree.
in.
It is very unhealthy for men to
But
keep
that's
it
see,
in.
that's why I said
But-
I feel like the wife, a man's
and
wife
male,
should be.
male suicide rates are extremely high because
Yeah,
of this reason.
exactly.
They don't feel that they can
SubhanAllah,
come
I
out
literally
and
saw a
talk
video
about this.
today. I literally saw a video today of a sheikh saying a man will never find comfort or peace in his life without a wife. What can I say?
What do you want? A blue Peter badge? Congratulations.
I would say, oh, you were clap.
Okay, you guys clap, like, congratulations.
I'm saying that like a man should always see his wife as someone that he can fall to without having to hide any of these emotions, someone he can break down to, because you know you're kind of in this together.
Let's forget the wife thing, because if we're talking about suicide, 15 to 29-year-olds,
Yeah.
most people that are not married. Let's talk about that. So
29.
Late
late
20s, mid 20s, mid
maybe they want
20s.
someone.
Okay,
but
okay.
But like
men
you're
are
at
usually-
the end of it, like you're gonna
Anyway,
come out of it
whatever,
soon.
People who are not younger, people who are not married. I think that it's important for guys to also have that support system around their friends,
Yeah.
where
Let
you
me
feel
tell
you
you
can
this.
cry in front
Let
of
me
them, you
tell
can
you
feel
this.
you can come out.
Yeah,
So for example,
you should be able
if you have
at this
suicidal
age.
thoughts or suicidal ideation, is that something that you feel that you can now go talk to your friends
Let me
about?
tell you this. I would
Most
say
cases, no.
I think everyone has that sort of person that they can turn to. In my opinion, I think they should have at least one friend who they can always turn to.
Yeah, but even in the group of
But-
friends, you should feel like they would at least be
I would,
supportive.
but I would say for guys especially, talking in a group of friends. This is look. I'm saying.
I'm not
from a guy's
saying now
perspective,
go and talk to all of them
Go
about it, but
for
I'm
a
saying
But
guy-
like the circle
go
of
for a
friends that
guy-
you surround yourself
Yeah,
with.
the
Has
circle
to
of
be
friends is different.
supportive.
I think a guy, say for example, he wants to talk about what's happening in his life. Yeah, saying in a group setting is very difficult for them.
Not a
No, I'm
group
not talking
setting.
about a group
Individuals-
setting. I'm talking
individuals,
about
Just the
group-
kind, just like individually,
agree,
the
I
kind
if
of
you
friends
have
that
a
you have.
friend who will not be supportive with your mental health issues, or you will not have a friend who you cannot reach out to in terms of difficulties, why are you friends with them?
I would
SubhanAllah.
disagree with that. I would disagree with that.
Really?
And
I
I'll tell you
can't
why.
be friends with someone. I'm not saying like there's
I mean,
friendships that are like
yeah, we're
not
using
that
the
There's
word,
friendship-
the term
yeah,
friends.
Yeah, I
Friend
feel like
is
we all
very
have
different.
different ideas
Friend
of
is very
friendship
different
right
because
now.
friend, because for example, friend can mean a person at uni who you have a class with.
That's
And when you
That's
go,
not a friend.
and when you go and you
That's
chill
a
with them
classmate,
and you chill with them after and you just
Okay,
get
maybe that's his
that's
definition
a
of
friend.
friend.
Okay, fine.
A
Support
friend is
system.
someone that you know you can chill with. You can talk to them sometimes, and you're cool with them. If you ask them to come out one time, they'll come out. Whatever. That's a friend. But I think
I feel like we have very different.
We
levels
have
of
different
friendship.
for me,
definitions.
I would say there's a difference between just a friend and someone who's very close to you, like a brother, like
That's
someone-
called a friend.
Yeah, but that's not a friend. Like for example,
That's
Abdullahi-
a close
my
friend.
For example,
That's a close
Abdullahi. You know, I've done a podcast with Abdullahi,
That's your close friend. That's your best friend.
No, but he's someone who I'd see as like a brother, so I could turn to him in times of need. Whereas someone like, okay, I'm not even gonna name a name. Someone just like,
okay, don't just start baiting people
out.
Right
someone out, they just look at it. I thought this guy was my close friend. I thought this guy was my close friend. But someone like, just for example, at uni that you met at at society, that you went out a couple of times, like. They're not someone.
I'm not saying turn around and be like, oh my god, this is happening in my life.
That's just someone I know.
But if they see you in a state, or if they see, or for example, you're not talking often, are they gonna reach out and be like, are you okay? Is something wrong?
Are they gonna worry? Are they gonna care
for you? Because if you don't have a friend that cares about your well-being, and not your physical well-being, your mental well-being,
your deen as well,
your
a friend that cares about your deen
helps you when you're struggling. I'm not saying every friend has to be to the point where you confide in them the most and thing, but I'm saying if you need to surround, especially if you are someone who has these thoughts, or not even just when we don't even need to talk about suicidal ideation specifically, but any form. I'm not saying that you need to have these people all the time, but you need to be at least surrounded by people who care about your mental health, your physical health, people you can talk to. I'm not saying every single friendship needs to be on the same level and that you can go to each. Obviously, they're going to have people that you go to differently about different things, but at the end of the day, any friend you have should care about your well-being. So I think if you don't have that, and especially if you're someone who's going through any of these issues, surround yourself with people who are a community for you. And community does not just have to be family. It's family, it's friends.
Yeah, I'll say for guys at least, that's a guy myself. I'll say, everyone has their own.
That in the bloopers.
That can go in the main video. It's fine for that day. Everyone has their own journey. So for example, I'm not going to say anything to a guy who's like. For example, I'm not going to say, oh, I don't do therapy, so guys don't do therapy. Guys, a lot of guys have therapy. A lot of my friends I know have therapy. A lot of my friends I know have therapy. Friends I know have therapy, and it's benefited them a lot, right? But I think for guys, personally, I think the best, anytime, because mainly for guys, I think it's stress and anxiety, and that's what leads to a lot of stuff. Obviously, personal experience, everyone's different, right? But generally, a lot of stress can overwhelm a guy to a point where he feels like he has no one to turn to and stuff like that. And the main release for guys, because obviously we're talking about girls is different, but for guys, I think the main release is doing stuff like going to the gym or playing their favorite sport, or doing something like that, where it's a release and they're away from all their problems. I know certainly for me, if I was having a hard time, like for example in Bangladesh, I would say that because it was very difficult. When I was in Bangladesh, I had no internet, no connection, no nothing. The thing that helped me kind of get through is just any period of exercise, or turning on. And so exercise I think is very important, because if you're physically healthy,
there's a very strong relationship between mental and physical.
100%. I think that's huge. But also, turning back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the reason I keep mentioning it is, and this is a question I wanted to pose to both of you. At what point in your life, not in your life, but at what place,
your life, my life.
At what place did you feel at least, the most amount of comfort and the most less stress? I would say in the last 5 years. Let's say last 5 years, or last few years.
Like a moment in time or a place where you felt what?
Where you just felt absolute comfort and ease and peace.
I know the exact.
Please.
I know the exact. You go, because
I have the exact moment.
No, wait, I'm trying to think about it. A moment in time.
2 or 3 months ago.
2 or 3 months ago, I made a certain decision that helped me relieve a lot of guilt and just stress that was on me, and I know that I took this decision wholly with the idea that I was doing it. And it was a difficult decision to make. I still struggle with it now, because I think, oh my gosh, it was also shitty ones that I was trying to think about. I've always been me doing this is good. I'm gonna get
Barakah, yeah.
out of this, but I can't explain how connected I felt with knowing that I actually did something that's difficult for me to do purely out of my faith.
And you see how that relates to your peace.
The moment I made that decision, now that you said that, I literally felt a weight off my shoulders.
Yeah.
I felt like I could breathe.
Go on, Amal.
For me, it would definitely be. I was just thinking the last 1 year, it's been a hard 5 years. I was like, let me think back to it. Yeah.
Or is it 22?
It's been a good life.
Or is it 22?
Last 5 years. For sure. But okay, now I'm thinking about it. I was thinking
the one like moment that stood out to me the most was this Ramadan that passed. I think that this Ramadan that passed was everything I needed and more. Alhamdulillah. I think it brought so much peace into my life during that period of time. I don't know what it was. I mean, it was a month of mercy, so could be that. Possibly most likely is that. But I just in that point of time. Also, I was in my placement year, so alhamdulillah, no exams, no university. I had a nice time. Okay, stop rubbing it in.
Okay, guys, you get it.
But anyway, back to the point.
Science-based degree.
STEM students, women in STEM. But no, seriously though, during that time was the time that I had so much time to focus on my deen. I had so much time that I never really had before to read the Quran, to listen to the Quran, to watch lectures. And I remember that obviously because of my own struggles with mental health, I focused on that the most during Ramadan. You know, I read about mental health in Islam. I would relate to the stories of the prophets, and then I would like through their hardships and advice and things like that. See all of these things that I didn't really have much of a capacity to do beforehand that I now have time to do. I think that along with exercising and eating good when I could, and things like that. But also, I was on my medication and I was doing.
It goes again back to the idea of a combination of all of these.
Yeah, and I think the Ramadan was the perfect time where I think that my mental health, my deen, and my physical health were in sync, in alignment for one of the first very few times. And I think, may continue to be inshallah. But I think that just shows the importance of regulation and, you know, focusing on the more together and this relationship and the significance of all three effects of each other.
You just made me remember something that I also kind of really believe in, and obviously it ties into, I guess it's just another way of saying it, but I really think self-discipline is one of the most important and crucial aspects of character development, and such a help to like avoid falling into depressive episodes. And it's like you really have to fall and hit rock bottom for you to understand that you have to climb back up. And when you climb back up with determination.
And when you mention discipline, that is also linked to routine. I think one thing routine is so important. When you struggle to get out there, struggle to eat, struggle to do anything, routine is so routine. I'm not saying be so busy that you distract yourself from feeling any of this, of course, because that's extremely unhealthy at the other end of the spectrum. But having a routine where you can do things in the day, and I don't think they have to be exactly the same. I think some people struggle with doing the same thing every single day. So I think you need to switch things out, do things you enjoy. Obviously, when you are depressed, you enjoy things less, but you need to do things.
I think the routine should be like
even when you don't.
But also, subhanAllah, like
productive.
what you're saying about routine is that I think for Muslims,
5 times a day.
5 times our routine is literally laid out
for us.
That is what gives me, like, you know when someone says, "Oh, it's so difficult to pray 5 times a day." You know how people.
We are already disciplined.
Prophets were supposed to pray 50 times a day. You know, for Musa alayhi salam,
but I think we should be understanding of.
No, I'm saying 100%. There's people who obviously are going to struggle
with so much.
especially when they're first coming into it. But our day is literally laid out for us. At this time, you pray. You should wake up. Fajr Salah, like, the reason the Fajr Salah is in the morning and when the sun comes up is because back then that's when the day actually started. Nowadays everyone's like, oh, you know, we wake up and go back to sleep. You know what I mean? But that was the whole structure. You wake up, Fajr Salah, you have your day, you sleep after Isha. And what did the Prophet used to do? He used to sleep, I think, between Zuhr and Asr. And you know what you're saying about the most peace? The most peace, I know it's a bit different from you guys, but there is a similarity, is when I went Umrah this year, in December. And the reason I would say it was so peaceful is because, firstly, I was with my family, but because my dad, he would go Jeddah, he did the Umrah once, and then he went to Jeddah for some meetings and whatever. So I would be alone because my sisters and my sisters and mum would be having their. In fact, my sisters and mum, they would have their, like, because they would be going, and oftentimes you get separated from the sister side, and so when I would go, I would remember just there was not a single stress on my mind. There was not a drop of stress. not anything off. Everything was off my shoulders.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And that is you're just praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We'd wake up at Fajr, we'd go from Fajr to the Kaaba and just pray, and then I would just read the Quran, and then I'd go around 10 to go and eat, and then I would sleep till Dhuhr, and then from Dhuhr to Asr you read Quran again, then Asr till Maghrib you eat something, then Maghrib to Asr you read Quran again, then Asr after that you go do some of the shopping for your family and whatever, and then you go and like literally doing that a few days, and it's just like you have no stress. And also I think there's so much comfort of being in Mecca and just being in a place where Islam was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ, and being in that area, and there's just a different feeling of that city. And to be honest, I remember someone said to me there's something called post-Umrah depression.
Yeah,
It's
I
like
heard
when you
that.
come back into the real world, you're like, bloody hell, it's raining, and it's like, and even there, the rain, it was raining when we went. It's one of the rain. It's just the rain in Mecca just feels different from the rain here. The rain here, I don't know. It's just it's
That's to the rain here.
it's just like so much. Everyone's like putting their face up, and you just letting the rain hit your face in your thobes and in your whatever, and everyone's just so you're just so connected. And interestingly, the reason I asked the question, I wanted to see. Interestingly for us, every single one of us three, the most happy and the most peace we've been at is also at the point where our iman is so it's at its peak as well. Our iman is so high in those periods.
Yeah.
When I was in Umrah in Ramadan, you said when you did something for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all of our iman was at the peak.
But I
And so
think there's
our-
also a lot of cases where I know a lot of people struggle with their iman in Ramadan as well.
100%.
I think it just depends on the person and the time, because there's been Ramadan where I've really struggled. And then
100%.
this Ramadan, alhamdulillah, is
And but also that is like everyone is gonna have their own struggle. Everyone, and this, the whole mental health, the mental health and topic in Islam is that it's literally everyone has their own journey with everything. So that's why the stigma around it. Obviously, I would say like from the get go, when someone's saying, "Oh, I had,"
But you know, the stigma for mental health is so like crazy that I remember when I applied to study psychology,
people say, "Yeah,
people were like, "Oh, I'm studying psychology. Like, why did you pick that?" And I was there baffled. I was like, people that I don't even know, like, I knew them. Like, I never would just be like, I heard you're studying psychology.
Yeah.
I was so, I would be accosted and I'd be like, what? Okay, I was like, again, lack of understanding. And I remember I was telling my auntie about she's quite a lot older, and I was speaking to her about this. I was like, oh yeah, all these people are saying, like, why are you studying psychology? This is this. If you're working with crazy people, are gonna make you crazy. All these stuff, and I'm like, I already have mental illness. I don't think I'm gonna study.
But also,
it's passed on.
they think it's gonna. They think it's like it's contagious, isn't it?
It's contagious, isn't it? And I remember
To be honest, though, what do you think about this? Is that negativity, not mental health, but people who
Negativity is contagious.
negativity, I think, is contagious.
100%.
If you're around negative energy,
oh my god,
just
if
the
you're
same,
around negative people who are negative all the time, you'll become negative.
you'll become negative, 100%. But when you're around positive people,
yeah.
when you're around positive people who are always not all the time positive.
Why is smiling sunnah?
Yeah, why is smiling sunnah? Why is saying salamu alaikum? Why is saying salamu alaikum, peace be upon you, sunnah as well? And it's hard to respond back, wa alaikum assalam. So there's all of these things. What we've gained from this, like from all of our conversations about the stigma around mental health, the ways of like kind of dealing with it in the Islamic community and this or whatever, is that Islam literally fits into every single thing that we're saying.
Yeah.
And it's not something that should be separate. Rather, something that
And
should
that's
be within.
literally exactly what my auntie said when I was telling her about it. She started laughing and she was like, listen, Somali made the most.
No, and 100%.
She said, listen, all those aunties and all those uncles that were talking about therapy and you studying psychology, you need to become a therapist and help those people.
But I would say now, this is my question I would pose to both of you. Is we've talked about how Islam is deeply embedded in not only just the concept of mental health, but the treatment of mental health and how it can be kind of aid. It can be used as aid.
The one thing before we talk about Islam, when we're talking about the stigma and stuff in the community, is I think another thing that has to be mentioned briefly is the actual treatment of people with mental health conditions in these countries. Like, exactly, in Somalia and stuff, people who have these health conditions are either treated as if they have a gene in them, are like, literally, I've heard stories, sheikhs read on them. No, it's beneficial, but that doesn't mean there's a gene in them.
Doesn't have to be a sheikh. It can be anyone.
But not even that. The actual treatment, a lot of the mental health hospitals are just institutions where people are chained up and like people are just
In
kept in
Bangladesh,
rooms
they have
and stuff.
a
It's horrific.
I think not even just there. I think globally.
No, globally,
Mental
but, yeah,
institutions.
mental institutions. But not even that, but in ethnic
know who.
communities, like if something happens and one of your family has like a mental health condition, they're shipped off to an institution.
Yeah.
They're chained there. They're either dosed up with
I
medication.
don't agree with the
All
concept
these
of
are-
institutions.
Not even that, but I think if it's needed for
I think
something,
some
it's
people
needed. But
have
I don't
to,
think
yeah.
that. Yeah, because
if you're
they're
a
you have to think about
danger
society
to
yourself and other
yeah,
people.
but I think the way
yes.
that mental institutions are run,
100%. There's a
they
huge
do
issue
more
with that.
harm than
They don't treat them as patients. They treat them.
like animals.
But I think the thing I'm trying to say is that people, as a community, we need to understand that though this treatment is wrong, and we need to counteract it and go about helping these people in an actual beneficial way.
And this links to my question.
Oh, there
We
you go.
talked about the stigma. We talked about all these different things.
Yeah.
What do you think is next? What is the way that we not solve mental health? Because we're never going to do that. But
TP.
solve some of the issues around the stigma. Solve the sort of issues around people not being willing to want to talk about with their parents. And to be honest, I feel like, especially with a lot of older generation, now, especially with TikTok, people get information with their things. So the older generation, yeah, I know.
It's a dangerous thing.
The older generation, they're always so people's minds are always getting changed nowadays, right?
like the new WhatsApp one.
For us lot, our minds can be changed like this. Whereas for the older generation, they have a set way of doing things. You lean one way to the right, one way to the left. No, khalas, done. What you doing? You're kafir. But what would you
Can
say?
we highlight how that's haram?
Yeah, exactly. it's haram.
Calling anyone
What
a
would you say is the ways in which
to
these
improve this?
issues can be solved?
Okay, so
As the final big question,
It's a huge question. Right now,
underlying question.
this in and of itself, like having podcasts and just having discussions and spreading our opinions and our thoughts, it's just normalizing the conversation.
normalizing it. I keep saying spreading information awareness. The lack of information is a disease. Like lack of information is something.
Asymmetric information.
Literally, lack of information is so dangerous. People need to understand.
It's
Understanding.
It's a very Islamic like
Knowledge
value
needed
to go and
knowledge.
seek
Knowledge. Iqra, read, people understand, contemplate. You need to. So for improving this, first of all, communities need to understand more. I think there is slowly an improvement in the last, I would say, 10 years.
So my dad's response was
Yeah, my parents.
I always say, and I told you I was going to mention
History, Ottoman Empire.
okay, history student.
Here we go.
This is when his niche comes in.
If you look at even the fall of the Ottoman Empire, I made a video about this. If you look
Shout out
at
his TikTok.
if you look at the fall of the Ottoman Empire, why it happened, it's mainly largely because the sultans, the Ottomans, they used to adopt a policy of fratricide, which is when, say for example, I would become king and you guys were my brothers. Yeah. As soon as I become king, you guys are dead immediately. Then, therefore, there's no contest for the throne.
It's been brutal.
Therefore, there's no contest for the throne. I would become king immediately.
Why do you become king?
Because so there's a race. Who can get to
your brothers first.
who gets to King's Cross first, yeah? This is actually how it works. I promise you this is how it works. So we have the same dad. Listen, this is how it works. We have the same dad. Say for example, you two are my brothers, I'm a brother as well. And we have the same dad. When the dad is king, he will place us all strategically to rule over different areas, yeah? So say for example, you rule over Holborn, you rule over Russell Square, and I rule over Hampstead Heath, okay? I rule over Hampstead Heath.
This is a ridiculous analogy.
The king would
I'm trying to wait for him to land.
the king would put all of us in different areas, and the person he wanted to succeed him, he would put him a bit closer.
Okay.
So, for example, he wanted me to be king, he'd put me in Russell Square, put you in Holborn, and you in Covent Garden. So I'm a bit closer. I'll be a bit closer. When the king dies, this is actually how the succession works.
Yeah.
When the king
Why didn't you
dies,
just pick?
no.
Yeah, can you just
Because there's just the bias. And sometimes he would tell the Grand Vizier who he'd want to succeed him. When the king died, the first person to the palace, they've established their throne, they established him.
Basically, who sits on the throne first?
Exactly. The other two
So it's a
brothers,
race.
kind of a race. The other two brothers would be killed. They wouldn't get beheaded. They would be strangled because it's illegal to shed royal blood. So that's how that worked. This was obviously disbanded in the 1600s. But what they did instead,
Inventive, I guess.
what they did instead is now if I become king and you two are my sibling, you two are my brothers, I'll just put you in a castle and you're not allowed to leave. So you just have to stay there. But what this did,
Imprisonment order.
what this did actually, is it meant that imagine being your entire life confined your entire life, you're not allowed to leave. What's that going to cause?
Depression,
mental health, anxiety, and a lack of education.
and
Trauma. Lack of education and trauma.
Trauma so
Lack-
deeply embedded that's going
Exactly.
to 10 different generations.
Lack of education, trauma, all of these things.
Yeah.
So now, when I die and you become king, do you think you're fit to lead?
No.
Exactly. That's why the Ottoman Empire. That's why the Ottoman Empire began to fall. Exactly. So then you're waiting still in a castle waiting to become king. When she dies, then you become king. And then they're just waiting. It's an ongoing cycle. And that is actually why.
This is why I'm saying there's hospitals where people are in prison.
Exactly. And this is why the Ottoman Empire began to collapse, because they didn't have any strong sultans anymore. They didn't have any strong leaders after post 1700, except for a few, Salim III, Abdul Hamid II. Other than that, they didn't have any strong leaders who were going to take it on, because all of them were mentally deranged. And that's because of that.
I like mental
Because of that confinement, because of the places, the conditions in which they were in. So when we're talking about mental health, it's not something when people say it's something that over the last 100 years has arose. No, because if you look at the fall of one of the hugest and biggest empires of history,
hunting for food.
exactly, the fall of one of the biggest empires of history comes as a result of the mental health of sultans. Do you understand how that works? The analogy was sick though. Like Russell Square Hoven, I felt like it worked.
I was waiting for him.
It landed.
But you could have just said a race.
Yeah, I had big expectations for that.
It landed. But yeah, so that's how I wanted to say. That's how Islam and that's how history is clearly, like, mental health is clearly embedded in history in the fall of one of the biggest empires, especially Islamic empire. And that's
Even in the stories of the Prophet.
I think it's really important that we always look back to history, because history literally
Teaches so much.
it sets the example of
What
how
we
we
can
should be and how we
100
shouldn't
million
be.
percent.
It's like
Heavy on the how we shouldn't be.
Yeah, especially looking back to like the Roman Empire and what resulted in the fall of the Roman Empire. We can actually draw so many similarities between them.
100%.
And what history is really like something that we should kind of draw a lot more knowledge from.
Reflect on 100%. But back to your question again about how we can do something about this. So other than the education, the the raising awareness, and what was it you said, normalizing it and things like that. Normalizing discussion and things like that. I think we also need to get more people into psychology. We need more people into these fields. I'm trying to see Muslim therapists, Muslim psychologists, Muslim mental health professionals, especially who understand the context of Islam,
They bring us
religion, and use Islam to help
And the
you.
culture as well.
And the culture, exactly, the culture is so important.
That's why we talk to our
which is
friends
why
about it
I
anyway.
am doing it.
Like you're drawn to people who
Understand
your struggle.
The therapist like, no, we can't say this to my
That's what
dad.
I'm
And
saying,
you're like,
yeah.
no, put your foot down with your dad.
Yeah,
no.
tell your parents this and this. Oh, if you don't feel like you can pray, just don't today. Like,
Exactly.
just don't
Yeah,
pray.
Yeah,
Those
my
different
therapist actually said that to me. She's like, as long as you have to say things
Like that.
But-
So I'm saying that's why I need to get more people in, and this
you know,
is
interesting,
why.
I'd say this.
That's why it's
My
needed.
dad, who's 69 years old. My dad's 69 years old.
Shout out to Uncle.
When we went to Dubai, we met one of my dear friends. I'm not gonna mention them, but they know who they are. We met one of my dear friends, and she said, "Oh yeah, I'm studying. I just finished psychology. I'm doing a master's in like dictionaries." My dad said, "Good. So you can fix all the people's heads, all the Muslim people's heads, because they're all focused on these little issues, and they need to focus on the
bigger
so
picture.
if you can fix the Muslim people's heads, then you can fix the ummah as a whole. But the Muslim people's heads are all focused on whether or not this is covered, or whether or not what's it called, my ankle is showing.
Yeah, minor things.
So minor things.
So I think, that's what I'm saying. More people need to get into it, and I think that is why Muslim girls or Muslim
Guys,
boys,
especially,
who are interested in psychology, I feel like there's a stigma about going into psychology, especially if you're a guy, but not just a guy. Muslims, go into psychology, make the change that you want to see in this field, open it up to people.
Go for it, man.
Who,
Inshallah.
be the change you want to see, and open the field up to people like us, or people who it can make a difference in their communities. And I think
And
that's
last,
just important.
and last point about that is like for Muslim guys, it's not just, and for Muslims in general, I think for ethnic people, it's not even just the stigma around psychology. There's a stigma around anything that's not STEM. There's a stigma. There's a stigma. I do history and political economy. There were people like,
Well, the first person.
why not doing maths?
No,
Why
my
not doing
parents
maths?
are supportive.
Like me, for me, it wasn't my parents. My parents were very supportive. It's like, those uncles and aunties, or
They always got something.
they always got something to
There's
say.
always an uncle or auntie.
But, so I think that
But shout out
that
to uncle.
shout out to uncles and aunties though. But that needs to change as
Yeah.
well. It's not just everything. So now I guess we're reaching the kind of end. So do you guys have any? I know you guys come prepared. Do you guys have any things final things that you want to say, or quotes that you want to read, perhaps?
Yeah. So I think, she would know more as a literature student, but I think in terms of literature, poetry, things like that, there's a lot of they address mental health and things like that a lot, and especially since it says Suicide Prevention Day and things like that.
This probably is going to be released the day after that. So.
Yeah, this is being filmed on Suicide Prevention Day. On the day. Okay, serious.
Okay, so the first quote that I'm going to read is by an author called Haruki Murakami. You'll probably heard of him before. So the first quote goes, "I am nothing. I'm like someone who's been thrown into the ocean at night, floating all alone. I reach out, but no one is there. I call out, but no one answers. I have no connection to anything." So I think that quote really talks about the feelings of loneliness and lack of community and lack of support, and how people feel so isolated when they're going through things like this. So I think that's a really important thing that we spoke about, the lack of community and how important community is and everything. So, surround yourself by people who care about you and people who want the best for you, people who you can lean on and rely on. And then the second quote is a bit similar. It goes, "It's like I live in a cage with no door and no key, and I have no way to tell someone how to get me out." And I think this quote leans into the idea of suicidal ideation and suicidal thoughts, and how people really feel like they're stuck in reaching out for support, and how these thoughts have some sort of like drowning aspect to it. And I think that it means that people struggle really to reach out to people that they need to reach out to, and it's extremely difficult for someone with suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts to put these into words, because it's difficult. How do you tell someone you don't want to live anymore, that you're finding it a struggle to survive, and how you're thinking of death if not acting on it? And I think these are things that are really hard, and if you know someone who's going through this as well, it's also difficult to be that support system. And I think that once we talk about that it's important to mention that there's helplines out there for you, like the Samaritans is a free helpline available any day or night for people to go for support on 116 123, and that's either for you or for someone that who's having suicidal ideation. But yeah, I think that's really important. And then when we're talking about literature and how books and poems are important in the terms of expressing these issues, Jumana here will read one of her beautiful poems that she's personally written in the context of trauma, was it?
So yeah, this I'm not going to get too deep into it, but this entire poem is meant to be like a metaphor for trauma, and how sometimes you have like a very negative self-image because of the things that you have weathered throughout your life. But ultimately it can be anything that you want to interpret it to be. So this is exciting. I am a second-hand toy, a doll with a missing button, a car with a missing tire, a teddy bear long forgotten, a teddy bear once admired. From the hands of an uncle to the hands of a mother, from ragged, rough hands to ones much, much softer. Muddy footprints, screaming smiles, and a battered doll face, held tightly in small arms, but an always empty embrace. I am a second-hand toy, a once clean slate now memory stained, and yet I still must play the part, Gloss me over with new paint and give me a new start. Sew in my missing buttons and replace my tattered dress. Wrap me up in silky ribbons to hide away the mess. I could be a birthday present or maybe one unplanned. Let me into your closet, into your wonderland. Wrap me up, tie a knot, red and green and gold. From hands to hands to hands, I'm full of stories all untold. I am a second-hand toy. Give me to a daughter and watch her fill with joy. Watch her smile and play with her now new favorite toy. The paint will wear away, the thread will come undone. My brokenness will shine to light and be seen by everyone. These are screws you cannot fix, tires you cannot replace. No tears will fall when I cry, for I am a glossed over porcelain face. All eventually has its death, to live now or die forever. Bury me under your bed, little one. Your soft hands deserved better.
Come in just to do the little snaps.
He ate that.
Big up Jumana.
That was so hard, bro. That deserves this, bro. That deserves this. That was hard.
Cold.
And those were her final. So,
Her final word.
oh man, it's cool. You can do this last bit without that. So I would like to say, Jazakallah khairan everyone for watching. Jazakallah to Amal and Jumana for joining. I think this was a very important podcast to make, a very important episode to make. And make sure to follow for both of them on Instagram. So Amal and Jumana on Instagram, you guys can give it a shout out.
Follow Matthew.
Follow me. Follow
His podcast. His TikTok.
Forgotten
History 8.
Forgotten History 8 on TikTok. And my final word, big up. My final word, in regards to the mental health, is a quote from the Quran: "Innamal usri yusra, innamal usri yusra." Verily, with hardship comes ease. Verily, with hardship comes ease. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said this. So, for every hardship and for every time you're struggling, remember this verse, remember this ayah, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not say this for no reason. He's saying this because every time you experience hardship, it's a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there will be ease that comes after, inshallah. So
Not always after as well, but also during it.
during it,
With
as well,
ease,
inshallah.
hardship
with
comes
with
after.
hardship comes ease.
Mm.
So inshallah, everyone who's struggling, I hope this podcast gave you some happiness, some joy, maybe, some hope, maybe, that the Muslim Ummah will be fixed up, inshallah, by two people who are right. Amal, this is on you, man.
Guys.
Do you want to pick up your poem? Jazakallah khairan for your poem.
Thank
If you have a poetry page, do you have a poetry page? Do you have a blog or something like that?
I do, but
Go on,
shy.
go on, give a shout out. Man. Yeah.
We'll put it in the.
I'll put it in the description. I'll put it in the description, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan for your poetry. Jazakallah khairan Amal for your wisdom. And thanks for watching, everyone. And I shall see you in the next one. Assalamu alaikum.